I'm replacing the oil pan gasket on a BMW E60 2007 525i. As you can see, I've already started doing some of the pre-work. I removed the air filter all the way back, and I attached the hook so I can hold the engine up while I'm dropping the subframe. The hook you can find in the trunk in the emergency case compartment there, and I'll be doing that in a minute. I also went and loosened the engine mounts on both sides. I loosened the bolts, as you can see right down there. And that's what I've done on the top side. Underneath, of course, I removed the belly coverings. There's not a lot I need to detach from a hose point of view. The subframe will come down with the rack and pinion. I haven't removed the tires yet. I don't believe I'll have to. However, looks like this one line here has a couple brackets attached to the subframe. One on the left side, one on the right side. I will detach. Okay, I got the engine support bar in place. I had to use some wood blocks on the side to elevate it enough to carry the in place in the middle. And then underneath, I've got everything ready to go. I have the my jack in place holding the subframe. The subframe is held in by 3 bolts on each side, 2 towards the front and 1 in the back. The other thing you want to do is disconnect the steering arm. It's 1 screw in there. You loosen that, spread it apart a little bit, and then it pulls off pretty easy. I'm connecting it, so I'm putting it back, but it's pretty easy. It has a plastic tab, so you line it right up again so the steering wheel stays straight with steering rack and pinion. However, I did loosen the 2 suspension arms on each side just to help it lower. Okay, now I'm lowering the subframe. I have it on my jack. I'll slowly bring it down. Make sure none of the cables are interfering. I was able to successfully remove the pan after removing all the bolts. Remember, I'm on the driver's side where the oil pan connects to the transmission, and in the upper left corner right here, there's 1 hidden bolt that was tied into the oil pan. Make sure you get that. And then there's 2 more down here that you have to loosen as well, that holds this bracket in place for a wiring harness. They all connect into the oil pan. Once I remove those and all the rest of the bolts, the oil pan basically just dropped out. And I had to lower the subframe pretty far. That's probably a good 10 to 12 inches at least to get the oil pan out. Also, on the driver's side, the transmission oil cooler return lines run right along the side of the oil pan. Where they connect to the cooler in the front of the car, they have quick disconnects on them. So it will help give you a little bit of leeway. There's steel lines, so there's not a lot of flex, but it's enough to at least get the pan out. So have the old gasket pulled off, and it's super brittle. It's like it's hard as a rock. The ribs that are supposed to, can't even move it. Whereas the new one, the rubber is very flexible, soft. So that just shows you these gaskets don't hold up. My car has 100,000 miles on it, and this gasket is destroyed. Okay, I have the oil pan back ready to put in. However, the gasket is loose, so it really becomes a pain trying to get it all in there correctly. So what I did was I finally got the oil pan in place, and what I did to keep the gasket from moving, I put little zip ties in all four corners of the oil pan just to keep the gasket in place so I could start a few of the screws. And then all I'm going to do, I haven't tightened anything down yet, I just left it loose. I'm going to clip the zip tie and pull it out nice and easy. Then I'll finish tightening the oil pan down. I'm also replacing the engine mounts. I did this one already, and I'm doing this one. Just 2 screws hold it in. Just easy as that. Take out the old one while you're there. We got the new one. Gonna put that in the spot. Bolt it back down, and that's as easy as it is for the engine mounts. I torqued down the oil pan. I also tightened up the little bolts that hold the transmission cooler return lines. And now I'm going to start to raise the subframe back up, connect the suspension arms, raise the subframe back up to the frame. You'll notice there's 2 dimples on the frame that they have to line up with. And I've just got my jack here, ready to line it up. It's kind of hard to see, but making sure the engine mounts are going into the holes as well. Finish raising it up. Looks like it's all going, it's all connected back up. So I'm about to finish my project of replacing the oil pan gasket on my 2007 525, which is an E60. So a couple things I learned. It doesn't need any fancy tools. Just make sure you have wrenches, your socket set, the Torx socket set. Make sure you have plenty of hardware. I have a couple floor jacks. Make sure you have an engine support bar, some safety stands. You know, I had to raise the car, got some of my safety stands in there. I had to raise the tires up probably a good 5 or 6 inches. You're going to need all that height underneath when you lower the subframe. And as far as lowering the subframe, you don't need to disconnect any brake lines or hoses or anything like that. The only thing I disconnected was the steering column from the rack. And it is important to remove these 2 suspension arms, the rear ones, the straight ones in the back there, because the subframe wouldn't go down until I remove those 2 arms. Other than that, there's a couple brackets just hanging off the top of the front part of the subframe, so I unscrewed those and just let them dangle. That was fine. And then other than that, it was just have patience. It's a lot of work. I think there's over 30 screws, 30 bolts holding in the oil pan. Some of them aren't so easy to get to. Make sure you have a flex swivel adapter for your sockets. But other than that, it's just a matter of just taking your time. Took me a couple days. I also have this 2-in-1 floor jack that comes in very handy for a lot of my jobs. And lastly, this is just for information only. I'm not a licensed mechanic, so I always say Make sure you safety first.